Human language evolved as an advanced compression algorithm. Its primary biological function is to encode highly complex causal models of our environment and transmit them to others. The utility of this algorithm is survival. It allows us to transfer life-saving data across a population without requiring each recipient to undergo direct, potentially fatal physical experience to learn those lessons. This chart represents a biological knowledge graph. Notice the solid directional arrows linking the immediate environmental cue of rustling bushes to a specific cause, a tiger, which acts on a human. The brain maps these causal relationships, calculating potential new knowledge. By tracing the edges of this established map, the human observer, the self, logically bridges the gap, associating the invisible cause behind the rustling bushes directly with a serious threat. To build a machine that is functionally intelligent, it must cross this exact threshold. The model must be able to compute and simulate this biological level of semantic complexity. This presents the core engineering challenge of natural language processing. Computer scientists needed to build a mathematical architecture capable of mapping the immense topological complexity of human semantic networks. This timeline tracks the 70-year algorithmic search for a framework that could support that level of complexity, starting in the 1950s and extending to the present day. In the early decades of this search, researchers assumed this mapping problem could be solved through brute force categorical logic. They attempted to force the highly dynamic, ambiguous nature of human speech into the rigid, binary constraints of early computational systems. That approach failed. Modern large language models replace discrete symbolic rules with probabilistic, dense continuous representations. During the 60s through the 80s, symbolic AI dominated the field. Engineers built expert systems relying entirely on manually hard-coded syntactic rules and rigid ontologies. Early conversational programs like ELIZA operated strictly on these predetermined lexicons and rule trees. If a user typed a specific keyword, the system output a predefined response. But human language generates edge cases exponentially. The sheer volume of variations in syntax, slang, and context made the rule trees impossible to maintain and scale. This diagram illustrates the pivot. By the 80s, computer science abandoned manual rules for statistical models. Researchers accepted that linguistic meaning could not be dictated by logic gates. It had to be approximated through raw data probabilities. The core mathematical engine of this new statistical approach was conditional probability. The goal was to calculate the exact mathematical likelihood of the next piece of sequential data. The n-gram model estimates a word's probability based on sequence history. To save immense computational power, the Markov assumption simplifies this history to just the immediately preceding word, creating a bigram model. It analyzes raw frequency distributions to generate probability rankings for continuations. However, if you scale up to track 3, 4, or 5 preceding words, the probability of finding those exact sequences in the training data drops to near zero. This creates massive data sparsity, which breaks the model's ability to predict accurately. Furthermore, pure n-gram statistics are just blind counters. They tally adjacent terms, but contain zero mathematical concept of what the words themselves actually represent. Statistical frequency proved computationally scalable, but it entirely lacked the underlying multidimensional semantic relationships required to accurately simulate a biological knowledge graph. Look at the next milestone on the timeline. In the early 2000s, the field moved away from discrete frequency counts and introduced neural models and dense representations. This introduced a vector space. The model translates text into precise coordinates within a continuous multidimensional matrix. In 2013, the Word2Vec framework provided an efficient method for training dense embeddings. Its continuous bag of words architecture evaluates surrounding context vectors' geometric relationship to predict a target word. It also deployed a second variant called the skipgram architecture, which reverses the objective, taking a single center word and predicting its surrounding context. Forcing language into these dense vector configurations naturally encodes semantic proximity, words used in similar contexts clustering together geometrically. This gave the machine a computable proxy for linguistic meaning. Recall the biological survival graph we examined earlier, tracking the specific relationships between the human, the tiger, and the rustling bush. Dense vector embeddings solve the mapping problem by naturally grouping these causally related biological concepts directly within mathematical space. The calculated physical distance and directional trajectory between these dense vectors perfectly mirror the intuitive causal edges of human biological reasoning. Embedding architecture bridged the gap between raw machine statistics and the intricate, context-aware knowledge graphs that human language originally evolved to transfer. This brings us to the final segment of the timeline, the deep learning revolution of the 2010s and the advent of the transformer architecture. Transformers capitalized on these dense representations by applying self-attention mechanisms. This allowed the model to weigh vector relevance across massive context windows simultaneously. When these networks reach a massive scale of parameters, capabilities like zero-shot reasoning and logical deduction spontaneously appear. These are categorized as emergent abilities. Modern large language models represent the scaled realization of mathematical architectures running over dense semantic spaces, successfully replicating the precise transfer of meaning that defines human intelligence.